When Taranga Leela was a child, the other orphans at the Cookieville Minimum Security Orphanarium always bullied her for her one eye. But when she's invited to a reunion, Fry suggests she go in order to rub her success in all their faces. Alas, none of them are very impressed, and they immediately resume making fun of her. All except one, Adlai Atkins, eye surgeon, on whom Leela has had a crush since they were kids. Adlai apologizes for how he treated her back then and even offers to give her cosmetic surgery to give her a fake second eye. Desperate for a chance to no longer stand out, Leela jumps at the opportunity. Meanwhile, when Bender hears that the government will pay a stipend for parents who adopt orphans, he decides to take home a full dozen from the orphanarium. Leela's surgery is successful and she sets about enjoying life with her new normal appearance. During a follow-up exam, Adlai asks her on a date and she accepts. Fry, who was in love with Leela even before her operation, is jealous and tells her that she was better off before. She ignores him, and her relationship with Adlai seems to be going well. In fact, eventually they start to talk about having children. Leela suggests adoption, there being certain poetry to two orphans adopting an orphan of their own. Bender is less enthused about his own adopted orphans. After crunching the numbers, he discovers that they're costing more to raise than what the government is paying him, so he puts them all up for sale. Leela and Adlai come to take a look, but are interrupted by the arrival of the authorities, who arrest Bender for child endangerment, among other charges. At the jail, the police agree to allow Leela and Adlai to adopt one of the children, and Leela sees something of herself in a little girl with a third ear whom all the other children bully relentlessly. Adlai agrees on the condition that he give her cosmetic surgery to make her normal. Leela, offended, stands up to him and says the girl is fine the way she is. In fact, she now realizes that she was also fine with one eye and demands that Adlai undo her own surgery. As Leela goes under the knife once more, Bender returns the orphans to the orphanarium. As the children bid goodbye to their temporary robot dad, he discovers that he's already starting to miss them. As one member of the Planet Express crew learned to take pride in who she is, another got to experience the joy of being a parent. Welcome to Space Podcast 3000, where the future is in the past.
It's interesting that this episode's title refers more to what seems to be the B plot of it.
Not as you would expect. So the title, the Cyber House Rules, is actually a reference to a novel, The Cider House Rules by John Irving, which is set in an orphanage.
Ah.
And in fact, Bender's line near the end, "Good night, you princes of Maine, you kings of New England," is also a reference to the book.
I see. So it's all has to do with the orphanage.
I haven't read this particular book. I know of it, but I do like what I've read of John Irving. In fact, I highly recommend one of his other books, The World According to Garp.
Well, actually, both plots seem to be fairly ensconced in each other.
True.
Yeah, they are directly related in this episode, which happens less often than you might expect. Weirdly.
Why is it called an orphanarium?
Why not just say orphanage?
Well, the fact that, orphanages as we know them for now tend to not really even exist. They haven't existed for like 50, 60 years. In many cases, they try to get individual foster homes for each person that's represented. They try their hardest. Like, they find family, they find anybody that can take care of them. Like, mass orphanages really are not a thing.
Well,
I don't know a lot about orphans.
Pitfalls to the one-on-one foster home problem, because you can end up with abusive foster homes. There are a lot of stories of that.
Oh, absolutely.
And we see one of them right here with Bender getting his stipend from 12 orphans. But the idea that the orphans are so neglected that even someone like Bender, being like the worst possible father, is the greatest possible thing for them to ever happen to them.
Yeah, the fact that it's even called a minimum security orphanarium and has all of the obvious prison parallels really does highlight just how much of a failing institution it really is. But what would you expect from a place that sends out reunion invitations the way that they do?
Right.
Yeah.
I love how Bender is like, stop it, it's a baby. And he keeps stomping it. A baby what? Like, that matters.
Yes. Although, like, all of this said, I don't get why the kids were all making fun of Leela for her eye when they were little, because, like, every kid I knew growing up would have found it really cool.
I don't know. Who knows when it comes to 30th century orphans?
Or who knows when it comes to 20th century or just kids. Kids are awful. I hated kids even when I was a kid.
I think it's at a certain age that it happens.
Not necessarily. I mean, obviously, kids. You would hope kids would eventually grow out of it, but I remember a story from, because I went to a public middle school and I absolutely hated it. Eventually, I went to a private high school and it was much more tolerable. And I did eventually, like 5 years later, like a few years after I was graduated, I ended up running into a couple kids that I went to middle school with. And because like I still lived in the same area, and I just assumed like 8 years later they would have matured or something, because like, you know, all kids are assholes in high school and middle school. I would have figured they would have
absolutely
been more
totally
no, but they were just as much assholes as they were before.
Lovely.
Yeah, some people don't grow out of it, but I mean, like, these are like 5-year-olds.
Yeah. I mean, I was bullied a little bit as a kid for being autistic before. I mean, none of my peers really knew what that was. They just knew I was weird. But, like, it wasn't...
I was too weird for the weird kids.
Yeah, but it wasn't very much. It was only, like, 1 or 2 specific kids at any given point. Nothing major. And then by high school, it was no longer really a thing.
It's really hard to describe how I was bullied. Because with ADHD, you know, your emotions are a lot more acute than everyone else's. So what might seem minor or even nothing to someone else could just feel like a serious blow to you.
I don't think that's necessarily an ADHD thing. I mean, I had ADHD as well, but that's just a thing for when you're a kid. Sometimes emotions just run extremely high.
True, but it is actually a part of ADHD. Emotional dysregulation.
Right. Honestly, I almost feel bad for Leela's peers and how they turned out. Like, I don't think losers is an appropriate word to use for people who are clearly homeless and suffering from institutional failures. Like, as we kind of implied earlier, this whole orphanarium, looking at its conditions, it is an institutional failure.
Right.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But they kind of justify it because they did still end up being assholes. So I'm like, screw you guys then.
Assholes still don't deserve to be homeless and suffering. That's the thing.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of showing, oh, well, if you're an asshole, then I don't know, it's dumb. They're obviously not supposed to be, we're not supposed to feel that bad for them.
Right,
but...
yeah, they obviously didn't want, that would, because like you look at Adlai, and the thing with Adlai, I get that they're trying to make him look extremely average. Like, he really does not stand out at all. He's got the brown hair and everything, but even a name like Adlai is somewhat of an unusual name.
They could have called him Adam.
Adlai Atkins. I really hate this guy, frankly.
Yeah, I get that he's kind of he is very much a stealth villain, I suppose, a stealth antagonist.
I don't know how stealth it is, because, like, just from his first couple lines, you can sort of tell how obsessed he is with normalcy. You know, referring to Leela's job as a fine, conventional profession. Like, you can just tell that, like, if this guy existed in real life nowadays in the year 2022, he would be, like, a member of the gender critical movement and super anti-queer. And honestly, you could kind of read this episode as a sort of a queer allegory, especially with Leela realizing that her eye is part of who she is and embracing it at the end.
Queer, neurodivergent, or disability.
That too. Frankly, if you ask me, normality is overrated. Like, I knew since
Oh,
I was really
absolutely.
little that I wasn't normal. I don't remember this, but my mother has told the story, how when I was, like, 3 or 4, I actually told her, like, "Mom, I think I'm not normal." And I think I'm different than other people. And she was like, "Okay, do you want to be like everyone else?" And apparently my answer was just to say, "No, I like being who I am." Again, I was so little, I don't even remember this, but it kind of tracks with what I know about
Well,
myself.
being based starts early, I guess.
I guess. I mean, not necessarily, but like I had my own period of being an asshole. Let's be real.
But and obviously, there is a lot to discuss in this episode because it goes both ways. Leela has also, of course, talked about the idea that she enjoyed being able to just sit somewhere with nobody staring at her or avoiding staring at her. And she just liked being able to blend into the background. So obviously, there are two sides of being able to look at this thing, where, like, too far in one direction, you end up with Adlai, who is just way too obsessed with trying to be average and not stand out, which is not the way that you want to go. So obviously, if you go too far in one direction, you have one problem, and you go too far in another direction, you have another one. But ironically enough, moderation is the key to moderation.
Of course, not everyone is capable of moderation.
Yeah, I would say the problem here isn't Leela's. It's frankly everyone else's for doing the staring at her. Like in a perfect world, everyone would be able to just be and do whatever the hell they want, and no one would bother them for it unless they're hurting someone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, which we're getting into a really deep sociological discussion of the idea of peer pressure or just cultural norms that help.
Well, that's
kind
the topic of the episode.
No, yeah, no. I totally get it. I would much rather talk about this than go into late stage capitalism for the 50th time. But like the idea that you have cultural norms that keep people in line, keep people from being way just completely sociologically ostracized for, in many cases, for a good reason. Because, like, people that there is an argument to be said that people that do try to buck the trend too much are dangerous. Because even if they're not specifically hurting someone or doing something wrong, causing this much upheaval to how society works is not healthy for society. Because in many cases, society works for a very particular reason. And changing that just to change it is the wrong motivation. You want to change it for something to be more inclusive or better, but don't just change it to make it different.
Now, I'm not saying change for change's sake, of course, but like the status quo is quite often not good. You know, like ostracizing people just for wanting to change it is
No, I totally agree with
I'm
that.
trying. It's just hard to word this in a way that isn't extremely, you know, I don't want to sound like even more of a radical than I am, basically.
Well, I'm thinking of a Yahtzee quote from his review of, I forget which Gears of War game it was, but it was one of the Gears of War games, where he went in because it's the popular game, it's the big game at the time, he's a critic, and so of course he has to point out all the flaws, but in the end he said, for what it's worth, I can't call Gears of War a bad game. Sometimes the majority is right for a reason.
I mean, that I haven't watched Zero Punctuation in a very long time, but like again, that's a good point. Sometimes things are the way they are for good reason, but sometimes the reason is just this is the way it's always been, and it was set up this way for racist reasons or the corrupt
yeah,
reasons.
Exactly. It's definitely a case-by-case basis. Yeah. It's not the best case in all situations, but sometimes it is the right reason. Like, you look at all the different ways of doing it, and then you find out, oh yeah, this is kind of the best way to do it. We've tried lots of other things, and this kind of works the best.
Eden, you have anything to say on the subject?
I don't really have much to say. I mean, But, you know, as I said, not everyone is capable of what is considered normalcy, and I think broadening everyone's horizons is the way to go.
Absolutely.
Well, at least broaden their horizons enough that they can make the choice for themselves. Because in many cases, they'll pick something just because it's what they're used to.
Well, like, this is also a large part of why, say, representation is so important. You know, people need to see all of these things because the more we see people who are queer or, you know, other ethnicities or other cultures or just behave differently, the more normalized it becomes and the less strange it seems, you know?
Yeah, you look at this thing and say, oh, this is another way of doing this sort of thing. This is another potential option.
Right, and then people are less likely to be ostracized for that, and that's that's something that we should aim for. But I think we've gone on this for a while now. There's plenty more to talk about. Like the joke where the professor just starts gaping at Leela's eye, and the noise he makes just fucking kills me. Every time it fucking kills me. I know a guy. I once knew a guy who had that sound as his text alert tone on his phone.
That one just ripped from the episode?
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
You text him and it would just be like, oh.
Would you ever text him just to hear that sound pop up?
No, but I hate typing with my thumbs, so I don't text very often.
I text a lot because I just hate talking on the phone.
Also valid. Anyway, on the main plot of the episode, with what Leela's doing, I think cosmetic surgery can be cool and good when done for the sake of helping someone feel comfortable in their body. I mean, like, I'm transgender. Yeah. It is something I am seriously considering for the future.
The same as here.
But, like, when people are doing it just because they want to conform to certain beauty standards, like Leela is in this episode, that's pretty fucked up, don't you think?
There's a direct reference to the Twilight Zone episode of Eye of the Beholder that is...
Oh, yeah.
Like the reveal of the face, that's lifted directly out of that episode, which has the exact same message to it. So it's obviously this was on the creator's mind when they were writing this episode.
I mean, it's a good thing to have on the mind. Eye of the Beholder is a fantastic episode. Like, if I were to put together a list of, like, the 10 Twilight Zone episodes that everyone has to watch, that would be on there. And yeah, I was going to point out that reference if you didn't.
And then there's Amy, who had cuteness reduced.
How would you even do that?
I guess she maybe had chubbier cheeks.
Although a chubby could also make it even cuter. I mean...
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like, her cheeks probably were rounder, more full.
To be fair, I also know people who would question why someone would have, like, breast reduction surgery because, you know, people like big tits.
That was a...
Well, you don't have to... You're not the one who has to carry them around.
Yeah, I do know at least one person who wants to get reduction surgery for obvious reasons, including, you know, like, back pain.
Yes, I have horrible back pain.
In fact, they made that joke on South Park where Wendy is talking to a plastic surgeon about getting breast reduction surgery, and his argument against her getting it is she's 8. But then he also said, although if you're looking to upsize...
I don't want to get into... I don't want to relitigate my problems with South Park.
But it's an obvious commentary. It's like, yeah, breast reduction surgery is a grotesque abomination of science, but breast enlargement, that's perfectly fine. There's just this double standard going on that's rather obvious.
Well, I mean, I know a few trans women who've gone for the breast enhancement because the results you get from HRT can often be limited.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's a different beast entirely.
And it can really depend on genetics.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping for certain results, but, you know, we'll see. I've only been on hormones for, like, 2 months.
You'll get there, eventually.
Yep.
Ultimately, Two-Eyed Leela is kind of cursed, honestly.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
Two-Eyed Leela looks really weird, though it might just be that we're used to her normal design.
Which, I mean, I sort of
too.
noticed this when I was creating the logo for the series, where I kind of had to base your picture on Leela's, and I had to like make it with two eyes. I'm like, this looks weird.
I mean, again, it might just be that we're used to Leela having one eye. Like, like when I was a kid, my dad wore glasses, and then he got laser eye surgery. And I remember for the first few months, I was always really unsettled because I wasn't used to seeing him without glasses.
Yeah.
It was a huge change to his appearance.
Same here. My little sister, she switched to contacts. I was just so weird getting used to seeing her without glasses.
Exactly. And then the same thing happened to me again when my grandpa shaved his beard for the first time in decades.
Yeah. People just changing their appearance is always uncanny for a while.
It can be.
Even for yourself, if you like, if I haven't shaved for a while and I look in the and I look in the mirror after shaving, I was like, holy crap, I look like 15 years younger.
I've seen a lot of people joke about that.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one where you shave and then suddenly you're a baby.
Yes.
So, I assume you guys caught the joke with the eyeglasses store that Leela walks out of. It's called iRobot.
iRobot.
Obvious reference to the Isaac Asimov book of the same name, which I gotta bring it up. I like Asimov. I don't really have anything else to say about that, just that it exists.
She's going in, she's buying all these like these things like glasses and binoculars and opera glasses, and like her other eye doesn't work. They specifically stated this.
Yeah, she shouldn't have gotten rid of all those monocles.
It's just, it's stuff that she couldn't wear before, and it looks nice. Again, to go back to the whole trans thing, it feels like a trans woman, buying feminine clothes, or a trans man, buying a suit or something. It's, it's validating.
Yeah.
Going back to the idea of the glasses, she was even wearing custom one-eye eyeglasses as an orphan. So, like, they were nice enough to give her those, unless those were donated as well. Where would those have come from?
Maybe they were made for, like, some other one-eyed alien. I don't know.
Isn't Leela the only, like, known one-eyed alien, though? Isn't that the whole thing?
I think she's, like, the only one-eyed humanoid alien on the planet. Like, they're kind of vague on this point, but I can't imagine there aren't other alien species with one eye.
Which is like, of course, going back into the other episodes, she's not an alien, she's a mutant, but they said she was an alien because aliens are more accepted than mutants, which again is getting into really deep philosophical debates here.
I really like the joke where Fry's just like, I am jealous, but my point remains valid, because it does.
Yeah, and I really like Fry in this episode. He has a really good argument. He's never stopped liking Leela, and he liked her when she had the one eye because that's what made her unique. And it really is kind of frustrating that Fry is completely in the right in this episode. He just has trouble articulating it.
Yeah, but like his whole "I am jealous, my point remains valid" thing, especially that line, really, I that stuck out to me, because that is a very common sort of way that people will like dismiss your argument, where you make an argument and they're like, oh, you're just jealous, or oh, you're just bitter, or oh, you're too biased. And it's like, that doesn't reduce the validity of your point.
I mean, sometimes it does, but not always.
Yeah, it doesn't immediately stop your thing. I mean, you can discredit some of it, but even still, if it's a good argument, it's a good argument.
Yeah, a good argument is not lessened just by who it comes from. That's absolute nonsense.
Yeah, like, sometimes people don't take you seriously if you cry when you're angry.
God, I hate that.
Or the people that try to argue an ad hominem against something that is like a verifiable fact. And like,
relevant to the...
Or it's something like, it's like 2 + 2 = 4. And it's like, says the math books, who are you going to trust? And like, this is like, that's obviously taken to the absurd degree, but there's people who make that same sort of argument.
Yeah, like, emotion driven arguments aren't invalid. You know, you can't always remain calm, especially if it's something that affects you personally.
Yeah, God, I really hate that assumption that however logically and calmly you can present your points determines how valid they are, and like, no, fuck that.
Yeah.
So Bender is going to sell the kids to a Chinese restaurant as
Ugh, I hate
livestock.
that joke.
God.
That is really fucking dark. That's like, this show has some dark humor, but wow.
Bender is such a lousy fucking parent in this episode.
Yeah. But I just hate the Chinese food is mystery meat joke.
God. Yeah, that's also a really terrible joke. I mean, at least with Bender, it's notable that I remember him being a lot better when he has a son of his own in the Comedy Central seasons, that we could probably chalk that up to character growth in the intervening years.
Well, he does other things to his son that, like in the Devil episode, but...
True, but I'm pretty sure that's a different son.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past Bender to have children all over the place, because he's saying he's trying to get a piece of Fembot earlier.
Yep. Did you notice the banner in the pub for St. Rodman's Day? What do you guys think Dennis Rodman, or I assume it's Dennis Rodman, did to get sainted?
I don't know.
Surviving hiding behind that Coke machine during the explosion.
Oh my god. That is such an esoteric joke.
Maybe he adopted 12 orphans.
Maybe. That would not be unprecedented with a celebrity adopting several orphans.
Yeah, Bender's a shitty dad.
Oh, yeah. That's it. I wonder how shitty Adlai would be. Just because with his attitude, he could very well not be pretty terrible. Like, I could see him being a very restrictive, regressive, abusive parent.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think the child would have an extremely average upbringing.
And not in a good way.
The child would be completely average in all stats. They would do perfectly fine in school, and they would not stand out in any way. They'd be like Anne from Arrested Development, the only girl to have not pictured underneath her picture in the school yearbook.
Who?
Anne from Arrested Development.
Egg?
Anne.
No, I was doing the joke. I was doing the joke from the show, which is...
Oh, I don't know the show.
Okay, so no, it's a running joke in the show that she's so bland, no one ever remembers having even met her. Although, fun fact about that joke, Anne was actually recast between her first appearance and the following episode.
I never had noticed that either.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's unclear whether the joke was born from that happening and no one noticing it, or whether it was part of the joke. Personally, I could go either way.
That is fucking amazing, though. Either way, that is amazing. The fact that I never even noticed that.
No one did! I only knew because I looked on IMDb. By the way, to our audience, don't watch Arrested Development. It's run for, 5 seasons. Only 2 of them are any good. And you can't even watch one of the good ones anymore.
But if you can, it's a decent... I just love the wordplay in the show. It was...
Okay, Arrested Development. Season 1, not very good. Season 2, great. Fantastic. I love Arrested Development Season 2. Season 3, would have been good if not for an extremely awful ableist subplot and a constantly used slur. Season 4, the original version that was done Rashomon style, was actually really funny. But people hated it because it was difficult to follow because it wasn't in chronological order. So Netflix took it down and they replaced it with a version that's in chronological order, and it ruins all the jokes and it's not funny at all. And then season 5 is just so unfunny. So yeah,
watch season 2.
Except the problem with that is season 2 has
you kind of need to have watched season 1, yeah.
Yeah, because the show really thrives on its running gags and callbacks. So, this is why I don't recommend people watch the show. Because you've only got, 2 good seasons, and you need to wade through so much garbage to get to them. It's not worth it. This was a very long tangent. I apologize. Anyway, there's a line from Adlai here that he says that Leela is 999,999 in a million. And I can't remember if I've made this joke before, but there are 7 billion people in the world, so if you're 1 in a million, there are 7,000 other people exactly like you.
Yes.
God, Adlai is just, on top of everything else, he is so terribly unromantic. Adlai Atkins is just a big ball of nothing.
Which I'm sure is the joke, the fact that he is so painfully average. I mean, they made a similar joke in Third Rock, where they put so much emphasis on trying to be the average American family that they specifically try to find out the middle of the road and follow it to a knife-like precision. Like they go see the most popular film in America because it's the most popular film in America, and they think about it as a perfectly acceptable movie, and they can't think of it because that's what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to not stand out in any way, and of course it makes them stand out incredibly.
I've never seen Third Rock from the Sun.
Third Rock is very good. The main joke, like the entire joke is like the aliens come to Earth and they have to try to fit in. But it's not the joke that the aliens stand out because they're so weird. No, the joke is that the aliens fit in extremely well because all humans are weird.
No, I know what the premise of the show is. I've just never actually watched it.
So yeah, if that idea sounds good, it's a good series.
My point about Adlai Atkins is he's just a big ball of nothing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He has no romance. He has no passion. He has no enthusiasm. There is just nothing to him. He is a big ball of nothing. He might as well not even exist. He's just taking up space. And I hate him so much.
And the fact that Leela would rather be with him than with Fry, that must make Fry feel terrible. The fact that she would rather be with this guy, and she specifically says it's because like she wants to date a guy that doesn't make other people go, that poor woman. And it's like, wow, yeah. That's just really twisting the knife in him.
Yeah, this episode has some stuff in it that really upsets me, but in the end of the day, honestly, it's fine. This episode is fine. It's not that funny, but it's much like Adlai, or what Adlai would say about things. It's acceptable. It's good enough, I think.
I honestly think the fact that we did get so much good discussion out of this episode, I think kind of elevates it better than just average, ironically enough, because there is so much that can be read into a lot of the stuff in this episode. So I thought this was a more, I think the ideas that it brings up are probably a bit more interesting than the episode itself. But the episode does kind of introduce this stuff without really falling on either side of it. Like, obviously they want to get back to the status quo because they can't keep drawing Leela with 2 eyes for the rest of the series, but yeah.
Yeah, again, there's good stuff in this episode. It's just, it's not the best.
Yeah, as what TZ said, like, the episode itself is just fine, but it does bring up interesting discussion.
Yeah, more or less.
It was just an average episode.
So who wants to get Chinese?
Yeah, Chinese food sounds good. I think I'll have the Chao Zhao Hai. Thank you for listening to Space Podcast 3000. Your 3 voices of the future are Nova Altman, Doug Hancox, and Eden Valerie. The theme music is Voxel Revolution by Kevin MacLeod. You can support the show and listen to new episodes a full week early at patreon.com/SpacePod3K. Follow us on Twitter at SpacePod3K. Be sure to join us next time as the Planet Express crew go on a cattle drive in Where the Buggalo Roam.